I'm excited to introduce our first presentation, which will be New Feature Deep Dive. And this section will be hosted by Brad Hopper, our General Manager. So let me hand it over to you, Brad.
Fantastic. Thank you, Brendan. And I am extremely excited that you've taken the time to join us here this morning at our Quantrix Dimension 2021. As Brendan mentioned, my name is Brad Hopper. I'm the General Manager of Quantrix. I joined just a little over a year ago, and I've had such a good time getting to know the Quantrix team, and also especially getting to know our fantastic customers. I'm sure that I've spoken to many of you that are here on the call, and if I haven't, I'm looking forward to doing that. Please reach out and would love to chat with you. So I'm presenting the so-called New Feature Deep Dive, and I'm now sharing my screen, and our fabulous producer Brendan can make that live for me in just a second. Maybe when the information goes live, you'll be able to see the quotation marks under Deep Dive, because actually it'll be a little bit more of a whistle-stop tour. We have so many new things that we've released in the most recent version and also upcoming in the next version that we'll be flying through them a little bit as we go. Just a quick process check, Brendan. Is my screen live? You see everything okay?
Yes, looks good.
Okay, fantastic. So here we go. The first thing I wanted to mention to you all who've joined us here today is that we are listening to you. So our customers are the most important part of what Quantrix is all about. We want to try to help our customers be productive, help them get value from our technology. And I wanted to just share with you as a first slide here, a look back at feedback sessions from prior Dimension conferences. We didn't have one last year, but I looked back into our requirements system to find input that was specifically gathered at Dimension 2018 and also Dimension 2019. And I've got two lists here for you. The list on the left side is features that we captured from you at this event and have actually delivered or are in process of delivering them as we speak. And then I have another list here of items that we captured from you that are not yet delivered, but rest assured are still in our prioritization process. Just run through them quickly, especially the ones that we've delivered. You asked for the ability to display some administrative statistics in the cloud, how many users are available on that system, how many models are available, how many models are open at any given time, the ability to create a library for a data source that you might have connected such that you could reuse it across multiple modeling sessions. Some new in and like filter expressions for data import, the ability to right-click a matrix and update the data import that feeds that particular matrix, to set the data type on multiple columns. And then a couple of bullets here at the bottom where we've actually delivered that functionality, but I wanted to point out in this session how we're actually adding to that functionality, a shortcut key to comment out formulas, and the ability to see and or edit the SQL query that's being generated in data import. Now there's some other features over here, as I mentioned, that are not yet done. You may or may not be a person who actually suggested that at a prior Dimension conference, and I'd like to just show this list for just a minute or two so that you could take a note if there's something there that that captures your interest in particular. You might want to keep that in mind, jot that down on a piece of paper for our last session, where you might want to submit that again and get others to vote on it at that last session so that we can use that in our prioritization process. All right, moving to the next slide here. What are we going to see in this session? Actually, this is a pretty long list. So I would encourage you all, if you haven't already upgraded to version 21.1, which we released in the May timeframe, go and grab it and explore these new features. I'm going to take a guess, though, that some of you, if not many of you, haven't yet updated to that latest version, and perhaps some of you haven't seen the video that we made walking through those. So I won't spend a lot of time on the 21.1 features, but we will fly through some of those, and they're listed here. Then also, this is kind of a special treat, not only hopefully for you, but also for me. Normally, we don't show features that have not yet been released. Our lawyers get upset about things like that, as do our accountants. But because this upcoming release will be released within the quarter, and because I've gotten several of my engineers to commit to me that we will release within this quarter, I think we can avoid the so-called revenue recognition problems. And I can show you some of the features that are already in the trunk, i.e. have already been checked in and are available to demonstrate from version 21.2. So what are those features? We'll run through the 21.1 as we go, but 21.2, some clearer cloud configurations. I'll introduce you to our tutorial and new training models. We'll talk about replacing linked categories, a blockbuster new feature importing into an existing matrix, binning dates on import, commenting formulas, as I alluded to a bit earlier, SQL mode for the data import, one-click PDF reports, something that's been requested quite a bit recently, language packs, and then a couple that are going to be there, but I'm not going to show them to you, and that is the cancelable database connections. I don't have a long-running database connection with me handy to cancel. Rest assured they will be cancelable. And then also the ability to pull data from S3. I'm not going to show that to you today, but it'll be there. All right, next slide here. I have just a few slides for features that I wanted to point out, but that I'm not actually going to demonstrate. One of those is our improved online help. So the help system was improved a couple of years ago, and then we have updated to the latest version and added some new features as well here in our online help. I want to point out a couple things. The search is much faster and delivers better results, and the navigation is a lot easier to work with to find what you're looking for within the Quantrix model or Quantrix Cloud help instances. You can also share aspects of the documentation and help files if you have a colleague who you think might be interested in the way a particular formula works or some other special feature within Quantrix. You can favorite things yourself. So if you want to be able to get back quickly to the particular part of the help where that gnarly explanation of a particular category item generation, for example, or something else is right there for you to review on a regular basis. You can do that with favorites, and also some new, let me hide this thing in the corner here, also some new Windows management capabilities. All right, so online help, much better. Check it out. Oh, actually, the last thing I want to mention about online help is the latest version also allows us to see which specific topics are the most viewed in the online help. So we can use Google Analytics to help us understand where is it where our customers are repeatedly looking into the online help to understand, and that might help us to prioritize and focus on making features more discoverable, making capabilities within Quantrix more self-service. So we're keeping all of our eyes on that as well. All right, a new feature in 21.1 is Bulletins. Bulletins is a mechanism that we can use to communicate directly with our users from inside the Quantrix application. This is a snapshot of what my Bulletins looks like today. What's new in Modeler 21.1, that will expire shortly as we introduce the next version, and you'll see a listing of what's new in 21.2 at the appropriate time. Of course, introducing Quantrix Bulletins itself. And then I'd like to point out to you something special, a special program that if you haven't heard about it already, or if you haven't signed up, my guess is that everyone on the call would want to. We have a program called the Quantrix Takeaway, and what that program involves is if your employer sponsors you with a Quantrix license and you leave that employer, if you go to a new job or you take off on your own, that entitles you to a 1-year no-charge license of Quantrix. We want you to be able to utilize your skills that you've generated in Quantrix and take them with you somewhere else. It's a win-win, obviously, because we want Quantrix to be introduced to new companies. And there are a few different caveats about that. You can take a look on the perks section of our webpage and find the takeaway program. Read for yourself the fine print, if you will, on the takeaway program. But I absolutely encourage all of you to sign up there because if you leave your current company, we won't be able to get in touch with you to remind you of this benefit. If you register for the takeaway program, we'll send an automatic reminder to your personal email, maybe once a quarter or something like this, so it won't be very spammy, just so that you will keep that in mind when you move along. All right, enough of that pitch. Now, cloud configuration. One of the things that many of you know is that the Quantrix model or version needs to be kept in sync with the cloud that you're connected to. And the default cloud connection is a free version of our public cloud that every modeler download has access to. So one of the things that we've discovered is that there can be some confusion when an organization takes the Quantrix Enterprise Cloud, which would be their own personalized private version of the cloud. The URLs can get confusing. So what we've done is in the install process itself, we've added a new section of that wizard that highlights to you, that free version is available to you if you're not using the Enterprise Cloud. And if you are using Enterprise Cloud, a reminder that you should get information from your administrator or your sponsor to put in the specific URL for your dedicated cloud instance, such that when you connect and want to share documents with your colleagues, you can do so in the right place. Now, that's for a new installation or a trial, indeed. For upgrades, we remember and remind you of the location of your of your cloud instance so that you can remember that and get to it quickly. All right, another new feature coming in the 21.2 release is the so-called tutorial model. This is already available. It's plastered everywhere where we could put it on our website and in the free trial downloads and so on, because it's so powerful. It's a broad overview of the functionalities within Quantrix for a totally new user who might want to get up to speed and try to understand what's possible. And this was designed by our fantastic solutions consultant, Lindsay. I think she's going to go into some more details on the tutorial and training models in her session a little bit later on. But I just wanted to give you a kind of quick look and feel here. It's beautiful, and it gives you a good example of the kinds of things that you can actually build in Quantrix to help your users understand how to navigate models that you might build. So the tutorial model in the next version will actually be part of our sample models, as will the training models that are not yet shown in this screenshot. The training models are a much deeper dive. There'll be 6 of them in total, and you'll be able to capture a badge on the completion of each of those training models. We at Quantrix want to make sure that getting up to speed on our technology is as easy as possible so that you can get the value from it in your organization as quickly as possible. So we think this will be useful not only for new prospects, but also existing customers of ours who are expanding to perhaps a new population within the organization. Gaining access to this at no charge within the application itself will get them up to speed. I do also want to make a quick plug for many of our partners who offer paid training that's much more in-depth and hands-on and one-on-one, along with the detailed information that's available on YouTube from Quantrix Authority, our old friend Rich Lopez, who has put more than 300 learning videos up. So there's lots of content and lots of different ways for you to get up to speed on how Quantrix works, including the new and up-and-coming training models. Also, something exciting, the translation models. So Quantrix historically supported multiple languages through a language pack. That feature went out of publication a number of years ago, and we're bringing it back now. So we've designed a new mechanism by which you can create the translations directly in a Quantrix model. So here we have an example of how that would work. If you as a partner or if you as a customer would like to contribute translation capabilities, that is very, very much welcome, and we're thankful for that. We have a number of partners and customers who have contributed in the past, and we're looking forward to them doing so again in the future. This is a little snapshot of what that looks like. This is the message. There are over 3,000 different keys, pieces of information that would benefit from translation here. Set up the radio button labels and corresponding values that will be set when selected. Let me give this a try. Imposta le etichette dei pulsanti radio I valori corrispondenti che saranno impostati. I'm sure Luca, our old friend Luca, is covering his ears with my terrible Italian, but there you go. It shall be possible sometime in the near future to get Quantrix translated into your own language. Looking forward to that. Okay, enough slides. Let's jump into the demo session. So let me first move over here to Quantrix, get Quantrix on the screen. And I have a little starter model here. It has a couple of things that are going to help me illustrate the features that I want to show. But before I use what I've already built here in the starter model, I want to do something that a lot of you might do in your work. I'm going to switch over to, and where is it? There it is at the end, Microsoft Excel. So we love Microsoft Excel here at Quantrix because so many people use it and find the limitations of Excel and discover the need for Quantrix. But Excel's not going anywhere, and in many cases, Excel is the de facto mechanism by which people get data out of their operational systems through an export process or something like this. So a lot of times people might need to gain access here. So what I'm going to do is click and select all of this data from Excel. I'm going to copy it into my clipboard and then move back to Quantrix. And all I'm going to do now is simply hit the paste key. When you paste, if you don't have some other selection made, Quantrix will launch the import workflow, which is part of a new feature in the 21.1 release. And while I'm here, I wanted to just show you, I think I mentioned that this was a request at a prior Dimension conference. I can select multiple of these import fields or columns and then change their data type. Of course, that would be incorrect. Quantrix has correctly guessed that those are text fields. So you can just give you a quick cameo for that feature. I'm going to hit OK, and we'll launch the classic data import functionality. Now, from here, many of you are familiar with data import. What I could do is take, let's say, the product category, drag that down to an axis. I'll take the region, drag that down, and then I'll take my sales and profits, etc., and drag them in to my cells. Now, what I wanted to show you is a brand new feature coming up in 21.2 called date binning. Obviously, it's quite common to want to have date fields in your matrices from your raw data imports. So I'm going to take this date field and drag it over to the column tray. And notice that right away we see a different dialog here. Okay, Quantrix has now recognized that what you have dragged over there, if you will, is a date field, and therefore it suggests the most common kind of formatting that you want to make. Previously, it would suggest all values, which I think is fairly uncommon, where you might want to pick each individual date and format it one at a time as items in your category. So we've chosen what we believe to be the more common category here, and we've renamed this from Date Quantizer, I think it was called, to simply bin the dates. And in a survey that we did of some of our customers, we discovered that the most common configuration of this date quantizer, or the binning dates, is to pick year and month. Now, we also make it possible to pick day here. And what we've done is make it super easy to get to the year and month with very little clicking. If you want to get to the classic or a variation of the classic date formatting setup, it's here under the custom fields. You can always go there. But we believe that this will really speed things up, not only because it's a bit easier to configure the formatting of your year-month category and the divider characters and so on, but also, here's my favorite thing of all, we have now the option to create two separate categories in one action. So I can say OK, and now I have here year, I have my short month, let's maybe bring month down here, and I have my items. So dragging the order date over, we can now bin them with just one or possibly two clicks and get two complete sets of categories that we want to use going forward. So I think that's a fantastic new feature that you should expect to see in the 21.2 release before the end of this year. Now, another new feature in 21.2, actually a little bit in 21 and a little bit in 21.2, is I've got a couple of matrices here, prices and discounts, that happen to be linked to one another via this My Widgets category. So what I'd like to do in this little vignette is to take the products category that I just imported. Actually, let me go ahead and accept that import. Take the product category and replace the categories in these other matrices. Now, as you know, it's always been possible to drag a category in and put it to the right or put it to the left. Something new in 21.1, it's now possible to drag it directly on top of a previously created category and completely replace it. This is very useful for replacing default categories. It's also useful for replacing categories that are part of a template that you might have started with, or perhaps you prefer the style of modeling wherein you build a prototype first and then you populate it with data. So this is quite useful for that case. I'll drop this category on top of my widgets. And guess what? I get a little question that I have to answer here. First thing is, would you like to replace all the instances of a linked category? So Quantrix has recognized that this category, my widgets, is linked across these two matrices, and it's asking us the question, do you want to replace it in both places, or do you want to unlink those and replace it only where you have dragged it? So that former behavior is the default in 21.1. In 21.2, the default is to prompt you the first time and then allow you to set your preference here directly in this dialog to replace, for example, all instances of that linked category. I say OK, and we're done. So you can see this list of copiers and chairs and binders and so on now is in the prices matrix and also in the discounts matrix. So that replace new category is a feature that we released in 21.1 and have enhanced now in version 21.2. OK, I'm just going to get rid of this and get rid of this and get rid of this and kind of start again from scratch. So I've got this little forecast matrix here. It's quite simple. I have year and I have a metric consisting of sales and profit. I have 3 different regions specified within the regions category. So this is like the most common demo that Quantrix does on a day-to-day basis for new prospects and customers. I want to add in a new category for products, and I want to build out a forecast that allows me to specify some growth rates by region for each of those products. So as you know, many of you will know, if I click on regions and hit enter, I can create a new category and start adding to the items for that category. That's a 2-step process. In our constant search for refining and speeding and streamlining your workflow, we've now added this new category button, and I'm sure you've guessed what it does when you click it. If I click this button, I get a new category and the associated default item. Now, this new category has a default name of the very descriptive B, and you'll know that we like our letters of the alphabet here when we create new categories, not only for the category name itself, but also the item is called B1. If I change the name here to say products, hit enter, now, well, it used to be that B1 would stay there in those items. And now we've adjusted this such that there's an alignment between the category name and the item name. This seems a little bit trivial kind of at this stage with such a simple matrix, but I have experienced for myself, if you have many categories in a matrix, it can often be difficult to know which one of them and where is it that I need to go find my product's items, especially if it was just called B1. Now that you've changed it away from B1, there's no correspondence. So that correspondence makes it a lot easier to know what you're modifying in the matrix. Another thing, I, Brad Hopper, am a little bit lazy when it comes to these things, and I don't really want to go find it. I want to just get a shortcut to help me get straight from that category creation exercise straight to that first item. So I can simply hit the tab key, and now I am at the first item within my products category. I can hit return a few times and build out my matrix. So now we have 5 different products here within the regions. Okay, so product category naming and item naming correspondence and the ability to navigate from one to the other. Oh, maybe a quick little thing here too. If I change the name, if I change my mind and say, actually, I liked that my products designation, or my stuff, what is it called? My stuff designation, I can change my mind and change that category. As long as I haven't edited these individual items, it will continue to follow the behavior that I've specified. So I'll just hit undo. I like products better in this case. All right, so let's continue on with our forecast. I'm going to create a new matrix and then drag it over here. And perhaps I'll zoom that in so that you all can see it a little bit better. Now, again, as you know, there's a lot of kind of default behaviors that you see when you're building things from scratch. So this category, this new matrix here is called matrix 1. And I want to rename this matrix. So it's always been possible to rename it from the model browser. But if I didn't know that, or if the model browser was not open, it might be a common behavior for someone to expect that they would right-click the name of this tab and rename it from there. Voila, this is a new feature in 21.1 that's now available to you. You can rename the matrix from here, matrix 1, I like that name. And then what did we want to do next? I wanted to drag over my regions, bring that across. And once again, I'm going to replace this category. And as I do so, you'll see that I got a correspondence between north, south, and east between these two matrices. And maybe I'll do a couple more things here. I'll rename this category scenarios. Enter. Maybe I'll call this my base scenario. And I'll make this a percentage, lop off a couple of decimal points, and we'll make this 110%, 120%, and maybe 200%. Okay, now what we're doing here is building out the basic structure that we want to do first prior to pulling data into the matrix. So sometimes it can be helpful for structure and evaluating whether your formulas are correct to use some dummy data. So maybe I'll go to the 2020 year and I'll hit the equal sign to create a new formula. And I'll just say this is rand between, I need to type it correctly, rand again, B, there we go, rand between 10 and 100. And make this formula here. So I'm just going to populate this 2020 year with my default data such that I can build out my formulas for the forecast and then come back and replace this with my real data. One of the advantages of using rand between is that if I add a new item, for example here, then that formula will continue to populate that data and I don't need to worry about pasting in or typing in new default values. Okay, so let's make that new formula here. I'm going to say our year, this equals year, and I'm going to select previous times, and I'll go over and choose this scenario and make that multiplication. So now you can see that every year our sales and profit will grow by the percentage as specified here. This is many of you who are longtime Quantrix users, this is kind of 101 stuff, but some of you may be new. This is one of the powers of Quantrix, that when you relate two matrices, Quantrix automatically incorporates that relationship into any of the natural language functions that you use, and that behavior is inherited so that you can write much simpler formulas that are a lot easier to write and troubleshoot as you go forward. Okay, so now we have this basic forecast structure set up, and what we'd like to do is go and fill this structure with the data that we have from somewhere else. So what you would have done in prior days, and you might still prefer this technique, is to open up a data import, create a new data import matrix, and then write a formula to populate that 2020 data using a using as function or a select function of some kind. And what we're going to do is a new technique that's going to be made available in the 21.2 release, and that is import data into an existing matrix. So I can go up to the data category here. I'm going to import data, and this time I'll choose a database. And I happen to have an H2 database lying around. I will go and find that on my desktop and select it. Connect to that database. And here you can see within that database I have one table, the so-called superstore. Maybe I can rename this. And I could save that into my library later if I wanted to. And now you'll notice that this import dialog, actually the first time I used it, you might have noticed that there's some slight changes to the import dialog, and this time I'm going to use them. So I have the possibility to import data from, in this case, my Superstore import. And if you look down at the bottom, I have a new possibility to put that data somewhere other than the default new matrix. So as I said, this is the default new matrix, but what I'm going to do is to choose my forecast matrix instead. Now, this is the matrix that's sitting right here behind it, behind the dialog box. And once I activate the data into option, I'll have the possibility to show a configuration dialog. We'll come back to that in a minute. Hopefully I don't forget to come back to that. But for now, we're just going to say OK. All right. So now we're going to take the same sort of behaviors that we did the first time with data import, taking advantage of the kind of replace category style of behavior. I'll take my product category and drag it down over the products. And I'll take my region category, drag it down and replace regions. I'm not going to do a date bin because I already have year in this example. But if you have an eagle eye, you might have noticed in that first import that we have data in the database stretching back to 2018. So we just want to populate this structure with the 2020 data, not the full range of data. So we need to set a filter on that data. And we want to do that by date. So I can drag my date field up here into the filters. And if you think about it, what we'd like to do is to import all the data that is that comes after December 31st, 2019, and perhaps before the 1st of January 2021. So we could use greater than, or we could use the between functions to do that, but it's actually going to be kind of annoying and a little bit of trouble to specify a filter like that. So we have a new capability in 21.2 called the SQL mode. So we can switch over to that now, and this SQL mode will make it a lot easier for us to cut and paste where clauses from, say, certified queries that we've built and blessed historically, or just in a case like this where it's a lot easier to write a formula in SQL than it is to click it, point and click it using the that kind of form-based entry. So all I'm going to do here is say equals 2000. It's actually equals 2020. Then I'm going to put a year function around the order date. And I'm going to hit the checkbox here, and there we're done. So now we've created a SQL-based filter, and we're going to extract the order date where year of order date equals to 2020, and we'll just get the range of data that we're looking for there. Now, one more thing I wanted to show you. I wanted to show you this in the last go-round, but I forgot, and that is a little bit of a presaging of something that Lindsay and Ben are going to talk to you about in terms of hierarchical data and grouping. This is a feature that's been around since the beginning of data import, but I've discovered in conversations with some customers that not everybody knows that this exists. So I'll just show it to you real quick in passing here. So if I have, let's say, a segment of my products, I can drag segment not into a category tray, not into a filter tray, not into the cells area, but actually on top of the items from another category. And you'll see it turns this green color. What that is telling you is that you can use the segment field from your database to group the items within this category. So most of you will know about what groups are. It's a mechanism by which you can take certain items within a category and put them into their own special bucket. But you may not have known that you can do this directly using your data from data import in that way. So I'm going to undo that for now. Okay, so we're getting closer to the big reveal moment for import into. We have filtered our data. We've set up all the categories that we want. So let's go back. Oh, I didn't pull the data in. So let's choose sales and profit. I'll control click to select just those two items. Then I will drag them into the cell area here. And now, once again, we get a new dialog. It's going to ask us a couple of questions. So the first question is, do we have a data category that already exists? And we do. That's called metric. Inside of metric, we have saved something called sales and profit. And so we can tell Quantrix that that's the category that we want to use for this operation. Then it's going to ask, do we want to keep the existing items in the data category? I'm going to check this box. That'll keep sales and profit. And if I happen to have some other user-defined items that were not going to be available in the data source itself, but I wanted to have them stick around, I would check this box to have them stick around. In this case, it probably doesn't matter whether I check the box or don't, because I have sales and profit that directly matches with sales and profit here. Now, the last question that we have to answer is, where would you like to put the data in this analysis? And so the default here is the first item within the only remaining unallocated category in our matrix, and that's year. And this is the correct answer. I want to put it into 2020. Now, this feature can be sometimes confusing. Imagine if I had another category here called type, and I had actuals and forecast. Then I would have another category in this drop-down list, and I would specify as a user, do I want the data coming from my database to go into the actuals item or into the forecast item? And clearly we would pick actuals in that case. So that's what this feature means within the dialog, is where within the existing category set, which item or items do you want to utilize for populating your new matrix? I'll say OK, and then we hit the checkbox. And you might think that we were done. We're not quite done, and this is just an artifact of the fact that I used a formula here to specify what shows up in 2020. The formula will override that data import at first. So I did that on purpose, though, actually, because I wanted to show you yet another feature that I told you I would show you, and that is the special shortcut for commenting out formulas. Many of you who are experts at writing formulas realize that sometimes you want to prototype them or build one formula to use in the beginning of your modeling and then switch to a more sophisticated formula and turn formulas on and off via commenting. And you might know that I can go in here and type the comment characters and comment out that formula. That's a little bit twiddly to go in and go to the beginning of each formula and add in those particular characters. So we added a little while ago on user request from the Dimension conference the ability to comment that out with a shortcut key. So I can hit Control and I guess you call it a /, and that will automatically add those comment characters to the beginning of the formula. And I can just turn it on, turn it off, turn it on, turn it off using that shortcut key. So that feature has been there. You might not have known about it, but that feature has been there for a little while. The new thing that we've added is it's possible to now select multiple formulas and turn them on and turn them off. It's kind of fun. I can just blink, turn them on and off as I see fit. So that should save you quite a bit of time, both commenting and uncommenting, and you don't have to select them all in a row. You can, control click and pick and choose which formulas you want and comment them out. So let's go back, comment out this formula, and the last step of this process would be to hit the data import, and voila, we have now populated our initial structure with this data. So now you can see that there's no information here, and that's because I haven't specified a growth rate for the Africa region, which is the first one here. So I'll go do that, 115, so you'll see some data in there, 112, etc., etc. So here we now have our completed forecast. We built the structure ahead of time, and then we injected into that structure using the data import, which is a common strategy. In fact, that's something that our colleague and friend Steve Bailey at Model Metrics often teaches as part of his training. So that if you use that methodology, this new technique should come in quite handy. And we believe also that this will make your templates and the templates that we provide also a lot more valuable, because you can take advantage of the existing structure that's there and fill your data in where it belongs, and away you go to the races with that. Now, the last feature that I want to show you before we take a little break and take your questions and then take a little break is a new PDF export. So I have a canvas here that has a magic button called the PDF Reports button. If I click this button, I bet you can guess what happens. I'm going to create a PDF report. Now, it's always been possible to create reports for individual matrices, but what we've added now is the possibility to write a script that will create a PDF report using any of the views that you have in your data set or in your model. So let me switch over to my documents folder. I can search here for I named that report My Report. Here it is at the top of the list. Can open this report and you can see that it's taking advantage of all of the formatting that you might have set up ahead of time. In this case, I did, to specify the matrix name, who printed this, when it was printed, and so on. And I've printed, or I've created this PDF for printing of both that primary forecast matrix and you could specify a group of different matrices to appear there. So how did we do that? I mentioned that we wrote a little script. It is the world's easiest script. There is a new feature of the scripting language called Export PDF. This is all you need. This only views here is optional. I've specified that I wanted to export the forecast matrix and the rates matrix. And then this is optional, but this last one you do need as well. You need to give your report a name, and you can also give it a path. The default is that it'll put that report into your documents folder. And with that, I think I'm done with the prepared content that I have. So what we'll do now is shift over into the Q&A section. I don't know, Brendan, if you happen to have seen any questions that you'd like to call out to me that I can either answer, or maybe some of my colleagues, if I get stumped, might be able to answer.
Great, thanks, Brad. We do have a series of questions that come in that have come in, so we can go over them. If there are some that we don't get to at the end, I think that any of us can go to that question and answer tab and send a reply if we don't get to it. So why don't we just go right in? The first question that came in is, when is that new release coming? Is there a specific date or time that you have in mind for that?
Okay, so it's approximately in the November timeframe. Again, normally we don't reveal that information because it's, we reserve the right to change it, and we reserve the right to change whatever features are in there. When I get to the roadmap presentation, you'll see the full legal disclaimer, but our current thinking is before the end of this year, hopefully sometime in the November timeframe. That's what we're shooting for.
Great. The next question is the import feature from Excel local settings aware?
So first of all, I want to point out that I didn't show you import from Excel because we technically don't directly import from an Excel file. In that case, I was copying and pasting. That question I will have to, unless Ben wants to chime in with an answer to that, I don't specifically know. I'd have to get back to you on that. I think both Excel and Quantrix can be specified to use your locale on your machine. So my guess is that it would be aware of that, but I can't say for 100% certain.
We are importing from data. Excel just happened to be the place that you got the data. So whatever Excel puts on the clipboard, we'll treat that as your raw data and import that.
Yeah, so I suspect that if you've specified to use your local locale language and delimiters preferences, that Quantrix would honor that.
Perfect, thanks. The next one is it possible for me to bin based off of my fiscal calendar, or do I need to have that set up on the underlying SQL?
Good question. So we don't yet support that new binning feature that we showed. We don't yet support fiscal binning. I think the more detailed custom configuration might allow that. But right now, the kind of shortcut feature doesn't include fiscal settings. But as you could imagine, that might be something that we would specify for a future release. And if that's a capability that you'd like to vote for, keep that in mind when we get to the session later on this afternoon.
Thanks, Brad. The next one is, does the bin date put the month names in chronological order, or was that just the way the data was staged?
Good question. So in this case, we do actually sort the categories and items that are created using the date binning tool. We believe that we've asked a few customers, and we believe that would be the preference. Get in touch if you think that that's not the right behavior, but yes, we do sort them by default.
Just to add a clarification, if you prefer them in reverse chronological order, that's available later. You just have to configure it to do that. But given that what we're doing is binning, making bins out of order doesn't make a lot of sense, at least I think. We're taking a bunch of your data and categorizing it. And so those categories are sort of like a chart axis where they're in a meaningful order. Hopefully that helps with the question.
Any other questions?
Does the SQL mode validate on the check mark?
We do not validate the SQL before we send it to the database. It is not validated when you commit it because we don't yet know whether the database will like your SQL. So I think the precise question, the answer to that is no, we don't validate the SQL. What we do is pass it off to the database and handle errors from the database.
A follow-up question for you, Ben. When you hit the checkbox, I think that's the moment that we send the SQL to the database for the filter.
It's slightly more complicated than that. When you hit that, we commit the filter. We say this is the filter that we're going to use for the next update. If live preview is on, then we will immediately fire an update, get an answer from the database, and report back to you that the database didn't like your SQL. Assuming it didn't. Hopefully it did. If, however, live update is off, it will simply say, okay, we have accepted that this is the SQL that you would like to send, and when you next update, it will then ask the database whether that was cool. And so, and in that case, no, you will not get a validation on clicking the check mark.
Excellent. Thanks for that clarification, Ben. Totally makes sense.
There are still a few more. I think maybe we can do maybe one or two more, and then if there's some others, we can try to follow up after. I know we want to give everybody at least a couple minutes of a break in between. So does the shortcut key hand multiple rows of a formula, i.e. Control Enter return for white space?
Yes, it does. I didn't show you that because I had pretty simple short formulas, but you know, this is a Ben feature and absolutely covers those cases.
I wanted to clarify one thing really quickly that Brad said earlier. Commenting via shortcut key has always been, or not always, has been in since we wrote it. I can't remember precisely what version. When you were editing a formula, commenting in or out even a single formula at the formula selection level will be new to the next release, as will commenting in or out multiple formulas.